Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Record Shelf. This is John, and we're reviewing the best albums of the 70s and 80s. And I am a drummer of 50 years. I've played a lot of these songs myself. I've been in bands, played in the studio. I'm familiar with a lot of this music, not all. And when I'm not, I will tell you. And there are times when I will actually react to a song that I haven't heard in probably 50 years or maybe 30 years or 40 years, but a lot of times I know the songs and I'm familiar with how they're made, with the band's history, and a lot of things that can make a review of this music interesting. Now, I'm primarily speaking to people who are in the 50 to 70-year-old age range on this show. But if there's any younger people out there who is new to this or who are interested in this music, you've come to the right place, because I'm going to be giving you a good solid background in this music and what it means to our generations, the Gen X and baby boomers, as well as the history of these bands in shorthand, as well as the history of the songs, the meanings of the songs, the technology used to make the songs, some of the creative things that went into these songs, and we're going to be covering a lot of this stuff. So on this show, we really do cover the gamut. And I can't cover everything about every song, but I try to hit the main salient points that makes this music so wonderful. So we've covered, so far on this channel, we've covered a lot of music. I mean, we've done everything from Pink Floyd to Fleetwood Mac to Rush, to Boston and more. So please get on this channel. Check out the old videos. I've done a ton of stuff. There's a ton more still coming. But the band, the Doobie Brothers, is who we're going to cover today in their album from 1973 called The Captain and Me. Now this, I think, is probably their seminal album, their best album. It had the most hits on it, and I think some of the best songwriting and music writing was done on this album. And in my personal opinion, this is my favorite Doobie Brothers. The people in this band. This is before the Michael McDonald period. You know, I like Michael McDonald period. For me, they kind of lost a little something when they did that. Kind of like when they brought Jonathan Cain on to Journey. They lost the edge and they became more of a pop band. And they lost the rock. And I saw this happen a lot in the 80s. But still, with Doobie Brothers, this was, I believe, their best album. Now, the Doobie Brothers consisted of Tom Johnston, who played acoustic and electric guitars and harmonica on the Long Train Running song, which is on this album. He played the synthesizer. He did lead and backing vocals. Then there was Patrick Simmons. He played acoustic and electric guitars, the synthesizer as well. He even played banjo on this album and lead and backing vocals. Now, Tom Johnson and Patrick Simmons had different styles. Tom Johnson had a more edgy style, and Patrick Simmons a more country laid-back style. So you get this out of the Doobie Brothers. You get this kind of mix of sort of a laid-back, country-ish feeling, and then you get more of a rock, groovy feeling from Tom Johnston. And you'll see that in their music. There was this back and forth being done, but it really was great because there was a lot of flexibility with their music. And then there was Tyrone Porter, who did the bass and backing vocals, and we had John Hartman on drums and percussion. Now, later on, Michael Hossack was also a drummer, so they had two drummers, and he played congas and timbales as well. So when I saw Doobie Brothers, they had two drummers, and this was nobody had two drummers. I think the next band that actually had two drummers was 38 Special, which we're going to be doing too down the road here. But the Doobies had two drummers, which really gave them a great rhythm section. And these two drummers work so well together. The problem is when you try to play Doobie Brothers music live and you don't have two drummers, it seems to be missing something. That's because you're missing a drummer. And let's face it, folks, most bands only have one drummer. So this was unique at the time, and it's still unique. So anyway, this album, there's other players as well, but one of the most notable players that joined the Doobie Brothers for this album was Jeffrey Skunk Baxter, who played pedal steel guitar on one of the songs. Now, Jeffrey Skunk Baxter went on to do Steely Dan, and he was a tremendous asset to both of these bands, and you can hear his incredible guitar playing in both those bands. So it really helped this album to have Skunk Baxter in it. And it was produced by Ted Templeman, who we find out later became the producer behind Van Halen. So Ted Templeman was a very talented producer in the 1970s, and he helped with the Police, he helped with Van Halen, and he helped with the Doobie Brothers. And so, yes, this guy was very critical to making this album successful. So, Doobie Brothers basically put this album out in 1973 by Warner Brothers, and it features some of the most popular hits, including Long Train Running, China Grove, and Without You. The album was certified platinum twice by the RIAA, and it was voted number 835 in the third edition of Cullen Lark's all-time top 1,000 albums. So there you go. Now, there was pressure on the band to move very quickly and to save some time in getting this album out. They took some old tunes they've been playing and put them on the album. And after laying down a track, Ted Templeman said, we still really didn't have it. And he said, make it about a train. Since you have this thing about Miss Lucy down along the track. So we came up with Long Train Running. So Ted Templeman was a big part in making this band's most popular album a reality. And it's got synthesizers on it, but at the time were rather primitive. But it worked really well with this music. And so we're going to get into it real quick. I'm not going to babble on too much longer. But I just want to say this band never really got, I think, the respect from the music industry the way they should have. Because they didn't come out with some kind of big message. They just wrote really good music. And, when I was a kid and I was traveling and driving the car, I would put on Doobies and I would just be able to cruise, oftentimes at excessive speeds. And, they had some really great songs. And it just unforgettable. And to me, it defines the 1970s music. The Doobie Brothers is a big part of my 1970s musical experience. And I can literally say there are some bands that just throw me back to that decade, and I remember it like it was yesterday. And the Doobies is one of those. If you haven't heard the Doobie Brothers, you're in for a treat, because these guys are amazing, really amazing. They have such flexibility in their singing and their music and their percussion, the rhythm section. Songwriting varies so much. As most bands in the 70s were, they didn't just settle on one style of music and play it to death. They would move around. They would grab things from different decades and periods and bring them in and rework them. I mean, so many bands did this. And I listened to reactors on YouTube, and it's funny to hear them because they expect this band to sound this way. They hear a song, they think, okay, so this band makes soft music. Then the next song they hear is completely different. It's loud, and they're like, wait a minute, is this the same band? And by the third song, they finally realize that this band doesn't just play one kind of music. They do a lot of different things. This was standard operating procedure for 70s bands. So if you're young and you want to listen to music of this period, get prepared. You're not going to find a homogenized sound, except on a very few number of bands. AC/DC being one of the minor examples of a 70s band that just did the same thing, same style of music over and over, successfully, but very unusual. Even the less progressive music rock bands of the 70s didn't do that. They had a variety of music they would play. They'd be doing blues, and they'd be doing, like a swing sound, and then do rock, and they'd pull in some stuff from the 1920s and 30s, and then they'd throw in some electronic stuff with keyboards and the synthesizers. So, and they put classical music. It was the combinations were almost infinite. And so many bands of the 70s did this. They just made this salad of sounds that you could feast your ears with. And it was wonderful. It was a wonderful time for music, an amazing time of talent and experimentation, and studios and labels were willing to let bands do this. They let them do it. And oftentimes they may fail until their third album. That was not unusual. And, they try and they wouldn't make it. And the label said, well, we'll just keep working. We'll just keep working with you. You guys we'll give you another chance. And sometimes they give them about 3 albums to get it right. Now, of course, by the 80s and 90s, that was over. If you get it right the first time, you're done. Well, that didn't happen back then. And it's a good thing, because a lot of bands that we love today would never have made it. We would never have heard of from if the labels had said, nah, you got to make a hit the first time. So music back then was more free and allowed more experimentation. And you're going to hear a lot of stuff that may be out today or in the early 2000s or 90s that actually came from the 60s and 70s because there was so much good music back then. A lot of people started sampling it. The sampling came along, which I've never been a fan of, but a lot of sampling came along, and they knew a good groove and a good beat when they heard it, and they would put it down as samples and kind of rewrite these songs and use these samples ad nauseum. But this is the real music. This is the actual music. There's no computers. There's no auto-tune. Everything is human beings making music. And yes, the only thing electric was the guitar or the keyboard and the microphone. Everything else was flesh and blood. And this is the difference between the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s music and all the stuff that came afterward, except for some exceptions. And I could say some of the grunge music and some of the rock in the 90s was like this as well. But that was it, folks. That's where they drew the line, and it became, now it's just a bunch of, it's digital, totally digital. People who can't sing are making music, and they sound, everything sounds so sterile. But this is human music. Human music made by human beings for human beings, not computers and studios and labels, okay? So this is really good stuff. And if you want to hear real music by real people, you got to go back a few decades. All right, enough of my pontificating. Let's get on with the first song off this album called Natural Thing. Okay, so we're going to listen to the first song called Natural Thing off the 1973 Doobie Brothers album, The Captain and Me. So let's find out what we've got waiting. Now, this one I haven't heard in a long time, so I might not be able to do a lot of reviewing, but I can certainly do some reacting. So I'm going to react this song because I haven't heard it in actual decades. So let's do it with Captain and Me, The Natural Thing. Very good. The natural thing. Excellent. One thing you'll notice about Doobie Brothers, this song actually starts off the album right because it starts off with the mood that the Doobie Brothers always gave their listeners. The Doobies came out of the 1960s, and if you know anything about the 1960s, you understand the youth culture at the time, the counterculture, the hippie culture, the music culture. It was all kind of tied together. But it was, for the most part, very upbeat and very positive. And yes, there were some very negative things that happened during that time. But geez, no, absolutely not much worse than's happened since. But a lot of the things that happened in the 60s were traumatic. We had the assassination of a president, a presidential candidate, and a civil rights leader. All three of these men could have changed history dramatically, and their deaths were really felt strongly by the country and the world. At the same time, you had this counterculture, this hippie culture, and it was a culture based on the ideas, looking at the American Indian as an example of how we should live. Believe it or not, a lot of the fashions you see and stuff in that time reflected that. So there was an optimism and a sense of freedom from old constraints, which we saw in the hippie culture and the counterculture and that whole period. There was also a lot of bad stuff, a lot of over drug use and things like that, and things that really didn't turn out so well in the future, but made things worse. But overall, the mood coming out of the 60s and the 70s was a mood of optimism. Even though we had the Vietnam War, which was incredibly traumatic, then we had Watergate, which was traumatic, then we had the gas crisis, which was traumatic, we had inflation and stagflation. I mean, there was not a lot of good things happening in the world and America in the 70s. But the music was positively optimistic. And this is a good example of that mood that comes in. And it's probably unique to that decade, okay? But I'm sure decades before it had it as well. But anyway, this is the sound that you're going to get a lot on the rest of this album and a lot of Doobie Brothers music. They were a very upbeat, positive band, as I said, coming out of that whole cultural experience of the late 60s. And the 70s were just like that. A lot of bands were, and there were some exceptions. Bands like Black Sabbath completely did the opposite. Okay, they were dark and heavy. But that was unusual. In fact, they were so unusual that's what made them popular. Nevertheless, this period of music had so much good, heartfelt music, upbeat songs. I loved it. And Doobies show us in this song, Natural Thing. That's what they're about, okay? They're a positive, upbeat band with great, happy music that you just like listening to. It makes you feel good. And a lot of bands in the 70s made me feel good. Boston being an example. You put it on and you just feel good, okay? And the Doobies did that with this song. Now, I don't know what this song is really about, but it's got a use of that guitar, that light guitar with sort of the phaser on it. And then you've got a lot of reverb. And then you've got this synthesizer, this ARP synthesizer, in the background being used almost like a horn section or a orchestral section. So that's it. And you can hear Tom Johnston's voice very clearly on this. And I think Pat Simmons might be doing some vocals too, at least some backups. And you got two drummers, which you didn't really hear really strongly in this song, but they were there. All right. So that's the first song off the album. The next two were huge radio hits, and everybody was playing these in their car. And if you got this album, these are the big hits that made it. Two of them are in the next two songs. So the next one is called Long Train Running. Long Train Running. The Doobie Brothers guitarist and lead singer Tom Johnston wrote this song, he said, which they played live for 3 years before they even put this album out. Johnston said that generally he writes music first, and sometimes he has a hard time getting the words down. So sometimes they come right away. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth. You know, if you're a songwriter, this is not unusual. And he said they played Long Train Running for 3 years before they even got it recorded, and they got called several different names. And most of the time, they would make up words they were going along. Well, Templeman says, call it Long Train Running. So that's what they did, and that's what it got called. So regarding the lyrics in the song, he said it it was just out of the top of his head. And he said, quite frankly, this is where all his lyrics just came from. Songwriting is a weird thing, he said, and everybody does it differently. He said, for me, I always write the music first and the words later. But I've had songs that just seem to write themselves, and those that are blessings to me because you don't have to sit there and strain your brain for hours trying to come up with lyrics. And it seems like they just come out on the paper, and you don't have to think. Other times, it's like pulling teeth, he says, and that's just the way it is. He says, it took me a long time to do this. I got into the whole train mode, and it's just stuff that came out of me thinking about this train thing. And it's not like he had a lot of points of reference with anybody named Lucy. He had been around trains on and off throughout his life, coming from the Central Valley in California. There's a lot of trains running up and down that valley, and I assume that's where some of that stuff probably came from. Now, this song is always a crowd pleaser whenever they played it loud, and it starts with a very recognizable guitar riff, which you're going to recognize. I mean, if you've heard it, you probably have heard it somewhere in the last 50 years if you haven't been listening to Doobie Brothers music. And it's a very recognizable riff that Johnston came up with. And he said he didn't think it was anything really out of the ordinary at the time. He said it surprised him because he was just finishing doing the song in Japan for a TV show, and they wanted to know all about the guitar lick. And he said, I really can't tell anybody anything because it was just a lick to me. It wasn't anything special. So, also Arlo Guthrie, who was a great singer-songwriter earlier, a popular train song from the previous year, he wrote City of New Orleans. And both these songs mention the Illinois Central train of lyrics, so they both write about kind of the same thing. Now, this was the very first single from this band's album, and this was their most popular album, and it had most of their hits on it. So let's go ahead and listen to Long Train Running from the Doobie Brothers. Hit it. I'm going to pause it there for a second. Love the bass part in this, okay? Listen to that bass. That's just terrific bass playing. You know, so often we listen to the drums, we listen to the guitar playing or the singing, but the bass, man, the bass in this song is really tying this funky groove together. Once again, early 70s music had a lot of funky groove in it, and that's what I love about this period. It wasn't just, you know, a solid 4/4 beat. There was that funky groove you could just dig into or just sink into. And the bass players, the good bass players, could really, really play good funky bass. And this guy certainly is doing it here. Just excellent bass guitar. And the drummer's playing a relatively simple drum part. But he's locked in with that bass guitar. And then you've got the guitar player going to the rhythm guitar. So the guitar player, the bass player, the drummer are locked into this intricate, funky groove rhythm, and no one's stepping on anyone's toes. Everybody is locked in and making it come out and bringing this puppy alive. So, and of course the lyrics just are nice sauce on top. So, and there's that melody in there too, but that melody is being carried along by this incredibly intricate, funky groove that just makes you want to dance. You know, it just makes you want to move. So let's continue on here with Long Train Running. Let's hit it.
Where would you be now? Na, na, na. La, la.
this is one of those songs that it's one of those songs that you don't want to end. Okay, it's just no. I want to hear more. I got to hear more. It's just one of those songs that just you know. When I was young and a teenager, I'd put this CD, this cassette, this album on a cassette tape in my cassette deck in my car, and go cruising around. And this is the kind of, you're on a road trip or something. This stuff you just want to hear, man. It just made you feel good, and you're going on the road and just you don't want it to end. It just goes on. You want it to go on and on and on. It's just that good. What a great groove. What a great feeling it gives you. Again, the music from this period was just so happy and upbeat and talking about love. We need, it's like, with all these things that are happening to people, if you don't give love, you just need it. That you need love to make these things, the wounds people are suffering and the things that are going on in the world that aren't right. If we would take love and put love in there, it would change these things. It would alter these things. It would save Miss Lucy's life, for example. It would change a lot of the way things are going wrong. And this is true. I mean, it's true. But again, it's part of the upbeat, hopeful philosophy and thinking that was coming out of the late 60s and into the early 70s. And it really was a part of the music pretty much through most of the decade. And then as the decade began to wind up, it got a little more narcissistic. But anyway, there was a lot of great stuff here, and this song is just one of my favorites. I think it's probably my favorite of the Doobie Brothers of all time. It just has a great groove, great feeling, and it's just too darn short. Anyway, so you heard some great singing there, great vocals. Both drummers, so you could hear them. One on the drum set, and one was playing the congas. So, and the bongos, like that. So, yeah, there was so much great groove going on and interlocking rhythms that just fit so well and made this song it wasn't a mess, okay? It locked together really well, and it was just a great song. Love this. Hope you love this one too, because I love that song. Okay, so that's Long Train Running. The next one is a very interesting song, and it's called China Grove. China Grove. It's a small town in Texas, about 10 miles from San Antonio. And the Doobie Brothers, singer and guitarist Tom Johnston, did he know about this town when he wrote the song? Well, he kind of did. He said that the words were written last, and they were made up around the whole idea of this wacky little town in Texas with a sheriff that had a samurai sword and all that kind of thing. He said the funny thing was that he found out in 1975 in a cab in Houston there really was a town called China Grove. Although what happened, he said, in 1972, we were touring in Winnebagos, and we were driving into San Antonio, and there is a China Grove, Texas, right outside of San Antonio. I've actually been there. I must have seen the sign and forgotten about it, he said. And when I came up with this term China Grove, I thought I was just making it up because of the words being about the crazy sheriff with a samurai sword. Now, his lyrics were influenced by the Oriental piano sound that Billy Payne came up with when they were working on the track. He said Payne was the pianist for a Little Feat, and he recorded with many other artists, including Elton John and James Taylor. He said that Johnston said the piano lick went da 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 dun 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 dun. You know, that Oriental sound, sort of sounding lick. Well, he said from there he took off and went to the place where he ended up lyrically, which must have seen that sign and absolutely forgotten about it. And when the cab driver told him about this in Houston, he said, you got to be kidding me. He said, there really is a China Grove. He said, no, there isn't. He said, yeah, there really is, the cab driver. And it's right outside of San Antonio. And he said, that's weird. And it turns out there's one in North Carolina, too. Yes, that's weird. The song has been in a number of TV shows, and it's a very distinctive guitar riff, which makes it just perfect for certain scenes. According to Johnston, however, he didn't think one way or the other about the riff when he came up with it, just like the last song. And he claims that the only time he knows a guitar lick was going to become a hit was the one he came up with for Listen to the Music. That one he knew. Anyway, so this is a very quirky little song about a Chinese town in Texas. And so we're going to go with it. If you haven't heard this one before, it's another groovy tune like the last one we heard, Long Train Running. Makes you want to move. It's just got a great feeling to it. So here we go with China Grove from Doobie Brothers. Let's rock it now.
When the sun comes up on a sleepy little town down around San Antonio, and the folks are rising for another day, round about their home. The people of the town are strange, and they're proud of where they came. Where you talking about the time I go? China Grove. Well, the preacher and the teacher, no, they are caution. They are the talk of the town. When the gossip gets to flying, they ain't lying. When the sun goes falling down, they say that the father's insane. They're Mrs. Perkins again. We're talking about the China Grove. China Grove. Every day there's a new thing coming. The ways of it are in view. The sheriff and his buddies with a samurai sword. You can even hear the music at night. And though it's a part of the Lone Star State, people don't seem to care. They'll just keep on looking to the east.
Here it comes again.
Talking about the China Grove. China Grove.
Yeah, love it. Love it. That is a great song, man. Makes you want to move. Just has a great feeling to it. It's a great song. Again, you know, these riff-based rock songs were a staple for 3 decades, and then in the 90s, it all became just a lot of chords. But it's these riff-based songs that are recognizable. See, what the later generations forgot was that you need a groove and you need a lick or a riff that is recognizable. And unfortunately, a lot of guitar players, musicians in the 90s and beyond, totally forgot that. Well, sampling came along, so they didn't have to think anymore. But when they still were doing it, they just started playing like this, like they were first-year guitar students. And they just forgot if you add a riff and you have a groove, people are going to get into it. They're going to remember it. It's going to be something that'll have a long shelf life. But for some reason, they threw the baby out with the bathwater in the 90s and never did come back. But this is great music because it has exactly those elements. It has the groove, it has the recognizable guitar riff, and has really interesting lyrics, even if it's kind of comical, a sheriff running around with a samurai sword. And hilariously enough, this town really exists. And there's one in North Carolina too. Had no idea for a long time. But this is one of those songs, folks, where you'd put the cassette tape in your car and you'd drive around town and feel good. It was feel good music. Everybody liked to have doobies. You had a party outside, or a party inside, you put doobies on, people are going to have a good time. And these guys knew how to have send great vibes out through their music. Just one of those bands that was good at that. And I really appreciate their music all those years because the Doobies were so essential to that feeling good, capturing that feel good stuff that we got in the 1970s. All right, so that is the last song we're going to do on this episode. We're going to cover the next 3 songs of this album. The next time we got Dark Eyed Cajun Woman, which is a good song, Clear as the Driven Snow, and Without You coming next, which is also a really good song. So this album is chock full of great, fun music. Makes you feel good, and it's just good stuff, man. It's just good stuff. I don't know what the 70s would have been like without the Doobs. I just don't know. Now, about the name. I don't know if I'm going to be honest with you. In the 70s, pot smoking was everywhere, okay? So I assumed that the Doobie Brothers meant they were doing doobies and they were all sitting around doing it together and they come to the Doobie Brothers. I'll have to look into the history of that name, but coming out of the 60s, I can't imagine what else it would really be about. Yeah, that's a tough one to think that it could be about grocery shopping or something. It'd have to be about what I told you about, smoking the devil's lettuce. And I'm sorry, that's the feeling. That's what I always thought it was about. Maybe I'm wrong, but hey, I'm going with it. It makes sense to me. So this was a great band. A great album, some great songs here. I just love the musicianship and the way these guys worked out their grooves and played their songs. It was just intricate little things going on in the back, and it all just worked together so well. We got 2 drummers. 2 drummers can actually conflict with each other very easily. So you need to make sure that one is not stepping on the other's toes. And so drummers got to learn to work together. So I'm going to play this rhythm and you play that rhythm. And if you get too close to each other, you don't even really get the effect of 2 drummers. So you need 2 drummers that can live with each other. The egos aren't going to step in the way. Their beats aren't going to step in the way. Their rhythms aren't going to step in the way. And they're actually going to enhance the music. And that is not easy to do. It's why you don't find a lot of more than 2 drummer bands or more than 1 drummer bands. But here they are, 2 drummers. And I said, a lot of times they use a second drummer to play the congas or the bongos or other percussion instruments that they needed to have. All right, so that's it for the first 3 songs of the Doobie Brothers 1973 album, The Captain and Me. I hope you've enjoyed this trip, this magic carpet ride, and we're going to continue. There's got a lot of songs in this album. We're probably going to have 3 more shows on this one, so please join me for the rest. And if you have any comments, please throw them on there. Any historical things you want to add about the band or the songs, corrections that I make. Sometimes I make a mistake. I admit it. You're welcome to correct me. And please, by all means, share and like and subscribe this channel. I really want this to have build a larger audience, and I'm hoping I'm doing that. We're getting more people watching now. And also, if you want to support this channel, please check out the coffee we sell. We sell 5 flavors of coffee. Follow this link, bradygourmet.myshopify.com. We have whole bean, we have ground, we have organic. This is coffee that we drink at home that I love. And I first drank it and I'm like, okay, this is it. We got to sell this. This is so good that we have to share this with other people. So you get this stuff. It's probably the best coffee I've ever had. And I've been drinking coffee my whole life. I love coffee. And I'm particular about my coffee. This is the gold, okay? Right here. So please get yourself a bag or 2 or 3 or whatever. And we got some bundling going on for Mother's Day. We're doing a special with bundling. So you can get a bundle of coffee for a reduced price. Please go with that. All proceeds from this part of the proceeds go to the National Autistic Association. I've mentioned that my son is autistic, so a lot of what we do on this channel is for him. And so this also goes to help families and individuals with the autistic spectrum. And it will help support our channel. I need to get some better equipment and upgrade the quality of the show a little bit. and anything you do will help me with that. And so, yeah, please get on here and just go to this site. And if you order your first order, it'll be free shipping. First orders are free shipping no matter what you order, how much you order. It'll be free shipping the first time. So please avail yourself of that special offer. All right. Well, thanks again for joining me. I loved having you here. Come back again, see the rest of this album. Go check out our other reviews. And we will see you again. Keep rocking on. See you again next time.